on this virtual meeting from the lands of the Darug and Gundungurra people in the Blue Mountains. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us online today. Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jacqueline Brinkman, the Chief Executive Officer with Economic Development Australia. Just got a few people still joining us, that's great. Today really is a milestone for EDA and the economic development sector. We are launching the pilot model of the EDA Evaluation and Measurement Toolkit. So since I started working with EDA around 3.5 years ago, one of the most consistent messages I have heard from members is the difficulty that they experience in measuring outputs, outcomes, and evaluating their economic development work. Access to data in Australia has also been a challenge and is sometimes very expensive. And there is certainly frustration amongst the sector that there isn't a standardised framework for professionals to use in order to report against their work. EDA has been active in this space over the years, in particular in Victoria, where EDA was involved in providing advice in response to the government's proposed standardised reporting framework. In 2018, the South Australian State Practitioner Network secured funding for EDA from the Local Government Association of South Australia to conduct a report into evaluation and measurement of economic development. The University of SA was engaged to do this work. Their report, which is available on the EDA website, provided some really excellent insights into the current state of play and the challenges faced by the sector. While useful and very insightful, we still knew that we needed a tangible framework for practitioners to use. So, to try to address the outstanding challenges, EDA formed a national working group. And I'd just like to take a moment now to thank those committee members that have been involved in that group for sort of 18 months or so, I think maybe even 2 years now. I think many of them are on the line, so if you're there, feel free to wave. But I'd just like to thank Alan O'Connor from the University of South Australia, Brian Hales, Emilio De Sisto from the City of Greater Dandenong, Jason McFarlane from Farlane, Lucy Heals from Praxis, Mark Holdsworth from RDA Midwest and Gascoyne, Michael Campbell from Lucid Economics, Mike Rosini from Urban Enterprise, Virginia Miller from the City of Holdfast Bay, Francis Gregorio from the City of Greater Dandenong, and Aldo Gutierrez from Brisbane Marketing. So thanks to all of you for your tireless efforts in working through the issues that the sector are facing in this space. One of the members of that group, Lucy Heals from Praxis, came across a simple performance measurement model for economic development. Now, this model was produced by the Government of British Columbia, and I think it's fair to say that we all, when we had a look at this model, we all fell a little bit in love with it. Whilst obviously built for a different but comparative context, I think everyone in the group recognised pretty early on that it is one of the most accessible and practical approaches to evaluating and reporting against economic development activity that any of us had seen. So with that, we reached out to the team in Canada who had developed the model, and we learnt more about it. We played around with it. We started discussions with the team there in BC around how we might go about developing a similar model for Australia. And we're very grateful for their willingness to share how they developed the toolkit and what lessons they learned along the way. With the generosity and support of the British Columbia team and the working group and the fantastic efforts of Lucy Heals and the whole team at Praxis in Western Australia there, who have dedicated hours to this project, we are delighted to be launching Australia's first evaluation framework for economic development professionals today. Now, this resource will be housed on the EDA website for members to use free of charge. Now, I'm going to invite Lucy in to explain a little bit about the approach we took in developing the toolkit. So we'll have a bit of a chat about it so you can get a sense of what we did and why we did it. And then she will present the model and explain how it works. After that, all of you will be sent a link after this session to the test model and the toolkit user guide, which we've developed. So you will be able to test drive the resource and come back in 3 weeks with questions, feedback, and at that time we'll run a bit of a deep dive tutorial to explore how the toolkit can be used in your day-to-day work. So that's how the launch will work. It's a good time now for me to invite Lucy in. So hi there, Lucy. Thanks for joining us and braving the storm.
Thank you.
So welcome. So to kick us off, Lucy, I distinctly remember the day that you brought that BC model to my attention, and you shared your screen and we were both sort of playing around with it. And we decided that, yep, this is definitely worth at very least taking to the National Working Group. And I remember how excited I was at the prospect of potentially developing something similar for the Australian environment. What was so impressive about the model that you found from your perspective?
Thank you, Jacqueline. I remember that day very well as well. I was very excited to share this finding. As quite often when we are faced with the new problem, the chances are that someone else has faced it before. So the working group has started with the literature review. And after reviewing a large amount of papers that EDA have kindly provided to us and the working group has brought to the table, I have started looking into international research, particularly in the USA, UK, and Canada. While reading a lot of great papers, I found that the key things were the distinction between outputs and outcomes, and that's the decision we need to make about what we will be measuring, and the use of a really clear logic model. Going along the path of the logic model, that's when I found the British Columbia website and the evaluation and measurement toolkit for economic development. What I really liked about it is that it was indeed a toolkit that was not a paper that describes what needs to be done and why, but it's an actual model where you can input your activities and it will guide you through the process until you get to the final result. I thought that that is something different that we can offer to the market. And then I checked the logic model. It was aligned really well with other research we have done, and I had a really clear distinction between outputs and outcomes. By being in that environment where we do a lot of evaluations and measurements, models are really useful, even when the user is not really familiar with the subject, because it takes you step by step along the way and explains you how to get to the result you need. So these were the key things that really inspired me to bring it to the table, and well, the rest is history.
That's it. So Lucy, tell us a little bit more about what a logic model is for anyone that's not familiar with that term, and why you and the working group, why we felt that it would really meet those challenges that we had identified that the ED sector faces in measuring and evaluating economic development activity.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So there's two parts to this question. I'll start with the logic model. So the logic model is a really useful way of explaining how your activities actually lead to the specific impacts. And this is basically, we can see it as a roadmap that connects what you do on the ground to the changes that happen in the economy or in the environment. We quite often use logic model when we're doing cost-benefit analysis. So, for example, it allows us to explain how, for example, building a swimming pool actually leads to the healthcare cost savings. And this is the same with the economic development, how advocating on the ground and helping businesses in local environment, providing them information actually leads to the business growth and therefore economic growth. So I will talk a little bit more about logic model in the presentation so we can discuss each component of it. Talking about the economic development challenge, the challenges that were set in front of the working group were mainly about that there is no objective way of measuring the performance, there is no metrics, and there is no guide of how to do it. Along with the complications of lack of time and resources, and the fact that quite often what is done by local governments on the ground is hard to connect to the federal and state government goals. So all of us in the working group are in this environment, so we understood the problem really well. So when we saw the British Columbia model and other research we have done, we realized that it is possible to address these problems by using a clear logic model and by researching the indicators and collating as good library as we can at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. As I said in the introduction, this issue of showing causality and drawing linkages between what's happening in your economy to your activities is, I think, the perennial challenge for economic development professionals. And what we learned through this process is that, of course, it's not unique to Australia. Other countries had grappled with this, and I think what I'm looking forward to sharing with the attendees today is just how simple the model is to really input and start reporting. So just before we get stuck into the presentation, just give us a bit of a sense about what kind of projects, just to build the excitement a bit more, what kind of projects will our EDA members be able to track using this kind of tool?
So what we want to do is we want to create a toolkit that is flexible, scalable, and efficient. So sometimes these things go against each other, but we were up for this challenge. So the toolkit allows to either measure just one specific project or one item on your list, or you can track multitude of projects or programs using this toolkit. You can use it really quickly just by using the drop-down indicators and the information suggested to you, or you can play around more and you can use your custom indicators. So this is the what Toolkit allows us to do. We were looking at measuring local economic development activities. So this is the activities that are happening on the ground. Quite often they are more around creating partnership, providing information, advocacy, creating some infrastructure, and addressing market failures. So we build it around this key core of activities. But then it is flexible enough to measure majority of activities on the ground, as long as you understand why you're doing it. And this is the reason of why you are taking these activities, is the core of the logic model, how it works.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what's key to mention is that we really have aimed to allow it to be scalable. So as Lucy said, it could be as simple as measuring the impact of building a website to highlight a specific sector, or, developing an investment prospectus to, building a new innovation eco hub. So we really hope that you enjoy having a look at it. I think we'll get Lucy to share her screen now and sort of slowly take us through it. Let you have a glimpse of it. We've got about 45 minutes for her to do that. She may do it quicker. She talks fast. Don't talk too fast. And then we've got time for some questions. And as I said in my introduction, you will have the opportunity to trial the tool after this session. You'll have about 3 weeks, and then we'll ask you to come back. Send us feedback before that, and we can certainly answer questions at the subsequent session that we'll hold as well. And then Lucy will do a bit more of an in detail tutorial at that time. So go ahead and share your screen, Lucy, and hand over to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That's going to be an interesting part now, sharing my screen. Just 1 second. You're going to see my babies. So just 1 second. Okay, and now you should see the presentation.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is just the cutest thing I've seen all week.
Good. Hopefully that's not the only highlight of this presentation today. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Due to COVID, I think 2 years ago, we have imagined that it's going to be a little bit of different format of launching it. But, you know, COVID has changed everything. So the good thing about today's launch is that we can do it nationally with all of you together in one room. And I'm really excited about it. Before I start, I would also like to really thank the whole working group. It was an amazing experience, and I got a lot of feedback and have reviewed a lot of materials before we actually got to this point. So thank you very much. So today is the first part of the launch, where we're going to talk more about the theory behind it. There's more information that is contained in the user guide. And then in the part 2, in a few weeks, we're going to go in detail in the model, and we can take some examples through and see how it actually works. So the agenda for today is to discuss what was the performance measurement challenge. Then we will provide the solution, which is the EDA toolkit we have created. Then I would like to discuss key concepts, because it's really important to understand them before we move on to the model itself. Then we're going to have a quick model demonstration, like a tester. And then at the end, we'll see what results the model produces and discuss next steps. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them at the end of this presentation as well. So the first part, the challenge. We have touched a little bit on it already, but before we go into the measuring and evaluating the performance, what we're actually talking about? We're talking about local economic development. And there is a few definitions, but majority of them come to this distinct and quite easy to understand definition that is on your screen. So local economic development is programs, policies, or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life of local communities. And this is what we were aiming to measure. These programs, policies, and activities is what this toolkit is created to measure. So local government have different approaches to economic development activities depending on their size and resources, but all of them are structured around building a safe, supporting, and thriving communities. Local government undertake the economic development activities through various means. It can be a partnership, it can be providing information, it can be building infrastructure, addressing market failures. So we wanted to create a toolkit that is flexible enough to evaluate the whole magnitude of economic development activities. So why do we need to measure local economic development performance? So the easy answer is because it is a requirement, and the economic development professionals are increasingly asked to track and report on metrics related to their economic development activities. But is there more underlying reason of why this is a requirement? We thought that this, and that's a better way of understanding of why we would be even engaging on this journey. So one of the key things that performance measurement allows us is to assess the effectiveness of your local economic development programs. It allows to show value and get a buy-in from stakeholders. It allows you to actually identify and spend time on high value activities. And this performance measurement allows to support informed and evidence-based decision making. It allows you to identify what can be tracked in order to show progress and success. And finally, it ensures the greater accountability. So the challenge for the practitioners on the ground is that tracking and reporting on metrics can be quite challenging. The things that make it challenging is limited resources and lack of clarity around what should be tracked and how it can be measured. It is also about which indicators to use, but it is again about establishing an objective way of connecting your activities to these outcomes and impacts on the ground. This is the challenge that we have identified for practitioners, and now we brought it to the working group, and this is the challenges that we set in front of ourselves to create this toolkit. So if addressing the first part of the challenge, what should be measured and how it should be measured, we wanted the toolkit to allow to track day-to-day local activities, but we wanted to connect them to broader state and federal goals, so we can show how this local government actually progresses towards a united goal of the state or federal government. We wanted to connect, have an objective way of connecting the metrics to activities, and we wanted to have a list of potential indicators and data sources that can be used. So this would address the what and how challenge. Another challenge of lack of capacity, resources, and also the size of the local government was addressed via allowing flexibility in the model. So we have some default options that you can just have suggested indicators or outputs taken from the drop-down list, or you can create your custom indicators or outcomes, depending on how familiar you are with the subject, how much time you have. Another one here is the model should allow scalability. So we wanted it to be useful for small governments with maybe a smaller amount of projects and smaller scale projects, but it also wants to be useful for larger governments that have more resources and embark on more challenging projects. And finally, we were aware of the problem of attribution. So we wanted to highlight this attribution issue and at least discuss it if there is no way to address it in this model. So these were the challenges in front of us and in front of you, and the next steps for us were creating the solution. So as we've touched on it before, the prototype for this model was the British Columbia Performance Measurement Toolkit. By the way, British Columbia government have an amazing website, and this evaluation and measurement toolkit is not the only thing that is really great in the website. Recently, I was looking through the website and I found that they have an interesting framework for business attraction and how you should set yourself to attract businesses to your local community. So have a look at their website as well if there is anything else you may be interested in. But going back to the measurement toolkit. So what was useful about this toolkit? First of all, it was a model. Then it had similar goals and objectives to what we set in front of ourselves. It had a very good structure, and it was in a logical set up in a logical way where you fill up the first page and then it leads you to the next page and so on. And finally, it had a really good researched framework behind it. Based on other literature review we have done, this was an accepted framework, so we knew we are on something good here. There are a few things that need or improvement in the model. So first of all, we needed to have an Australian indicators library. Then we wanted the toolkit to allow more flexibility and efficiency. So British Columbia toolkit does not suggest outcomes or indicators. It just provides you steps and tabs where you fill in your information, but you have to do all, they provide you a library, but you have to do all your research yourself and connect activities to metrics yourself. We wanted to improve that to allow for more efficiency in the use of the model. And finally, we wanted to have some automatic results population. So once we fill in the model, the results page automatically pre-fills for you, and you can just see the results straight away. So you don't have to copy and paste information from one tab to another or connect these things. You just go step by step, and then you get the result. So introducing the EDA toolkit. So the toolkit provides a logical step-by-step process for measuring the performance of programs or projects. It has an Excel-based model, and it also has a user guide. So they should be used together. And if you follow the user guide, it will tell you what steps and why you should be undertaking. The user guide also has more information about the concepts or the why we are doing certain things. We wanted the Excel-based model to be as user-friendly as possible, and it has helpful hints and tips throughout the way, and some wayfinding information to allow for you to use it easier. So why use this toolkit? If we didn't get the correct message just yet, I will say it again. So the toolkit allows flexibility. So the model uses a drop-down list of outcomes and indicators, and you can also use the alternative outcomes. The model is scalable, so it is scalable to any program or project, as well as the amount of time you have on hand. We have a significant indicators library, and the good thing about it is that it can keep growing. There is logic in the model that we can extend the indicators library, and the more you use it, the more familiar you get with it, we can add more indicators into the library. We have developed an established logic model. So this is one of the key things that came out from our research, is the theory of change logic model that removes the need for you to find an objective way of connecting the metrics you're using to the activities you're doing. It has automatic results communication, which means that the logic model follows the step-by-step process, and then the results are created automatically and can be copied and pasted into your Word document or presentation to show the value of your work. The toolkit is efficient, so it has a quick way of demonstrating values. And finally, it credits responsibility. So the users of the model are reminded about the external factors in the broader environment that are outside of the control of their local government, and are encouraged to list these indicators to ensure that the full responsibility, either positive in what's happening in the environment that's positive or negative, is not just on local economic development practitioner. So the solution, we will go back and have a look at the model. But before we go into the model, I'd like to discuss and make sure that the key concepts are understood. So one of the main concepts here is a logic model. So the EDA measurement framework is based on a theory of change logic model that connects project activities to the ultimate outcomes that can be measured. A logic model is a visual representation of the pathway, and it connects your project activities and shows how they contribute to its ultimate outcomes. It also provides a clear roadmap for your project and connection between what you invest and what you achieve at the end. This logic model, theory of change, allows to visualize the entirety of your project from where you now to where you want to be or where you have arrived, and it creates an easy way to communicate this to stakeholders. So here's our logic model. Central to this methodology is visualization of how resources or inputs contribute to activities that you're doing on the ground, which lead to outputs and then connect to the outcomes. We have also divided outcomes on strategic outcomes. So this is a bigger reason why you are undertaking the activities, and intermediate outcomes. So they are short-term or medium-term outcomes that can actually be measured. This is how it looks in the model. So this is a screenshot. What you need to do is you need to fill in step by step what you're doing to get to the final indicator. You should give a project name. It is not required, but it's helpful. So define what program or project activities you would like to evaluate and give it a clear name. So all of this follows through into the final results. So this is why the name should be understandable to someone outside of the organization as well. Then you need to look into the inputs. So what you invest. So this can be resources such as funding, or it can be staff time. This allows you to understand the final value for money, what you have invested and what you received or creates at the end of it. Then we need to define activities. So you need to define what you're actually doing. You need to define actions you take to achieve the results. For example, it can be talking to stakeholders, engaging website developer, running training, and so on. So these are day-to-day activities you are undertaking. So the outputs is what you create by undertaking these activities. And what you create is a tangible service or product that your activities yield. So, for example, it can be number of workshops if you are running training. It can be number of clients you have contacted or provided information to. It can be number of new contacts made. So this is output. Quite often, that's where the models stop in terms of what tangible things you have created on the ground. But we want to connect to the next step of what actually changes in the economy based on that. That leads to the strategic outcomes. So why you're doing it. Here, a model allows you to select one of 12 identified outcomes from the drop-down menu. This outcomes is the why that underpins the reason for undertaking the activities. I will talk a bit more strategic outcomes and which 12 outcomes we have there. Then each strategic outcome is connected to intermediate outcome or measurable outcome. This is what change your activities actually affect on the ground in the short to medium term. So these outcomes are measurable. They're indicating progress towards achieving your project strategic outcome. And you can select them from the drop-down menu as well. So the intermediate outcomes are linked to strategic outcomes. The big definition here is between outputs and outcomes. So the activities that local governments undertake are in leadership, advocacy, planning, collaboration, engagement. However, the engagement and collaboration is not the final reason for why you're undertaking these activities. For example, the preparation and facilitation of the entrepreneurship workshop is not a goal on its own. The goal is probably more around to increasing local capacity and that the entrepreneurs in the local community will start operating businesses. So this is the strategic outcome of why you would be undertaking or delivering workshops for aspiring entrepreneurs. It is this outputs is what you create or produce. Various outcomes is why you do it and what changes in the economy as a result of it. It needs to be a clear distinction between these two, as this is really important to the correct use of the model. So strategic outcomes. Strategic outcomes represent the concrete ultimate economic development activity goals. So often they are the goals and objective of your local economic development strategies, for example. And although there is no standard way how local governments undertake their local economic activities, the research suggests that the sector overall enables and facilitates the activities in these 12 strategic outcomes. So we have done a lot of research in this area, and these 12 outcomes, strategic outcomes, in our opinion, combine the magnitude of the activities and the reasons why local economic development practitioners do what they do. So the first one is attracting new business. Another one here is retaining new business and encouraging the growth of existing businesses. Then it is attracting investment and diversifying the economy. The next one is about improving and aligning local skills, retaining the population or growing the population. Number 9 is attracting visitors and supporting tourism industry. 10 is increase employment opportunities. So this is a little bit different from attracting new business. This is specifically about encouraging the employment in the local area. The number 11 is improving the quality of life of residents. And finally, it is increasing international competitiveness. So you have this list of strategic outcomes, and we have a library of these strategic outcomes with examples of activities that fit under each of them. So it allows you to read through what is included under each strategic outcome and select which one aligns with your activities best. This is done so you don't go through the full library of outcomes and indicators available, but you can just select a few ones that align with your strategic goal. So the intermediate or measurable outcomes or goals, they are linked to these strategic outcomes. Then the measurable intermediate outcomes are linked to the indicators. So it narrows down the amount of indicators, the amount of information you need to go through to get to the final result. This is an example from the user guide. The user guide has a description of each of the strategic outcome. So for example, attracting new business. So the key goal of this project activities is to increase the number of businesses in the local area. This goal can be broad and area-wide, so it can be just increase number of businesses overall, or it can be specific. For example, to attract specific sector or industry. For example, you want to grow health sector because you know that you have competitive advantage in this. So once you've selected this strategic outcome, you'll have a drop-down menu of the following intermediate or measurable outcomes. So you can increase the number of business entries in total. You can increase the number of business entries by your target industry. You can increase the number of business entries by size. So for example, you can target, do you want to attract more of large businesses, or do you want to support small business and you want to track how you are doing, how you're tracking on that goal. You can measure the provision of assistance programs. So do you have these programs? What is the quality of these programs? Provision of marketing and branding programs. Provision of engagement with potential new businesses. So for example, you can call and give information to the potential investors, or you can take them on a tour of your local area and show them what the great environment is to set up a new business. You can increase number of employing businesses. So in some areas, there is a lot of small micro businesses or self-employed people. So maybe you want to target them and make sure that they grow and they become employing businesses. So this is the measurable outcomes. The example of activities that you can undertake to achieve these outcomes. This is in no way exhaustive way. This is just an example of what it potentially can be. So you can facilitate workshops to increase local capacity to start business. You can provide advice on key local industries and customer needs. For example, you may have done retail analysis and you have realized that there is an under-provision on specific key good or service that the local community wants, and they're currently purchasing it from another community or abroad. So you can provide this information to businesses. Talking to and providing advice to potential new businesses or businesses that want to relocate to your area. You can also prepare and distribute the investment prospectus to attract new businesses. So this is how we set out the model. And there's more information in the user guide, and there's also helpful hints and tips throughout the model to allow you to understand what strategic outcome suits you best and what intermediate outcomes you want to measure. The last key concept that I would like you to have a look at is external factors. So you already determined your strategic and intermediate outcomes, but outcomes in that definition are broad and they're influenced by a lot of external factors, and some of them are outside of your control. This is called attribution issue. So it is more difficult to separate the long-term outcomes from these external factors than the medium or intermediate outcome. But still, there is a need to discuss and list external factors. So what the model allows, that it has a column that asks you to think about and list external factors that were happening at the same time while you were undertaking activities that may have had an impact on you achieving that outcome. The external factors can help you. So for example, it can be a subsidy of the state or federal government, or it can be a special rate set out for the purchase of land in your area and setting up the business. Or it can be something that affects your outcomes negatively. So the easiest one to think about is COVID. So if you were doing something in attracting tourism and visitation to your area, regardless of how well you may have set up your system, how well you were doing, progressing towards your goal, it may have all changed because of COVID. So this column allows you to think about what was happening in the outside environment and listing these external factors. And now we are coming towards the pinnacle of this session, demonstration. So before I switch on to the model, I'd just like to discuss how this is set up. So when you open the toolkit, the first thing you need to do is to enable macros. So this allows the pre-filling and the connection between tabs. So by allowing macros, you're allowing your final results to be filled into the result page. The toolkit is set out in a linear way and has 3 key steps. So the key steps are the ones which are highlighted in red. So first one is logic model. So this is where we define the project name, list resources or inputs. We define our activities, we list outputs, and then we select the strategic outcomes from the drop-down menu, and we select the intermediate outcomes. Once that is set up, the information you put in moves on to the next tab, which is step 2, indicators. There you need to select your measurable indicator. So you will have a little drop-down menu again. If you don't like any of the indicators suggested, or if you think that they're not applicable to what you're doing, you can always select custom indicator and then go through the library yourself and select the indicator you think fits your situation better. Then you need to calculate change. So the key thing here is that when we measure the performance, we are not measuring the static situation of how it is now. We need to compare what it is now, how it is now, to how it was before. So the ideal way of using this model is when you are setting yourself goals and outcomes, and you are thinking about activities you want to undertake in an economic development environment, you look at the model and you set out what you are trying to achieve, and you will have an indicator that you will need to measure. Then you can put in the information about what the current environment is. So for example, how many there are currently businesses in the health sector. Then after a few years, or for example, after you run a workshop and a year later, you can go back and check how many businesses there are now in the health sector and put that number. So the difference between the baseline...
Like you can't...
Sorry, someone's talking. So the difference between what what was there before and what you have achieved now is what we are putting in an indicator. And then on this tab, during this step, you also need to list external factors. Once you've done that, you are done. You just need to click on the results page, and you will see the diagram that shows your pathway, and it is filled in. You can just copy that diagram and use it in whichever way you need to use it and to communicate the value of your project. So the model also has two libraries. So these three red tabs, they're key steps you need to undertake, and then the blue tabs, they're libraries. They are there to help you make decision on what outcomes to select and what is most applicable in your case and how to do that. So you have a strategic outcomes library that has the description of strategic outcomes, has a list of intermediate outcomes that is connected and has an example of activities. And then we also have indicators library. So indicators library has all the indicators and that are connected to the outcomes, and it has a data source where the data is coming from, how often it is updated, and so on. So that indicators library can grow and you can add more indicators to it. So if you found that there is not a good indicator that is not there, you can add it and then use it. You just need to connect it to your intermediate or measurable outcome. So let me just switch to the model and have a quick look into it. Sorry, I think you're gonna see my puppies again. Here we are. Hopefully you guys can see it. Let me know if you cannot see it. All good?
That's great, Lucy. Looks good.
Cool. All right. So this is our model. We probably going to distribute the locked version. It's only to ensure the integrity of the model, as there's lots of formulas and connections between tabs. We don't want you to accidentally delete it and then destroy the integrity of it. So the cells that are open are the cells that you actually need to do some actions with to get the results. So the first is just a cover page. So it talks about the, what we have done, what is the toolkit for, who you can contact for help. And then it has key model instruction and processes. So these are the things we just discussed, which steps you need to undertake and what is behind each tab. It also talks about tool wayfinding. So their cells are colored in different way. Light gray cells are the input cells for the logic model. So you have to put information there for the model to work. Dark gray cells are linked to other cells and tabs. You don't need to do anything. They will just automatically pre-fill based on what you have, or based on the information you have put in previously. And light blue cells are there just to provide additional instructions or examples to make it easier for you to follow the model. So first step is logic model. The top of each page has a little bit of the background information that can help you with filling out this page. Once you've done it a few times, you don't need to read that again. So it talks a little bit about why using the logic model. And it also shows you how the logic model steps are connected. And then this is final where you are putting in your information. So in this one, you need to put in the name of your project, and you have a few lines here. So each line is each project. So if you have a program that has a few projects or activities in it, you want to put them separately. So then you can measure the impact of each of all activities you're undertaking, and then you can sum them up together in one program at the end. So here you need to put in what you invest. You don't have to do it for the model to work, but it's a good idea to do it so you can do the value for money assessment, either internally or for your stakeholders. This is something you have to input, and you need to think carefully about what activities you are undertaking under this project. Then next one is what you're creating by undertaking these activities. And then you are selecting the strategic outcomes. So by clicking on the cell, you get a drop-down menu and you select the outcome that suits your case. Then after you selected this outcome, there's going to be a new drop-down list for intermediate outcomes. This drop-down list connects the strategic outcomes, so they change based on what you select in a strategic outcomes column. So this one, attracting new businesses, says everything about businesses. Whereas next one, we have attract investment. It talks about increasing public investment, quality engagement with potential investors, and so on. And then final one, I think our example is about attracting visitors. So it's all about increasing tourism expenditure, increasing number of visitors, tourism offerings, and so on. So once all this pre-filled, we can go on to the next page. Here also there is a button, red button, which you can click to learn more about strategic outcomes. So it takes you to the library, and you can read a little bit about what strategic outcomes are, differences between activities, outputs, and outcomes. And here is the description of each strategic outcome and example of activities connected to it, along with the intermediate or measurable outcomes. So this, if you're not sure which strategic outcome to use or what measurable indicators or outcomes are going to be connected to it, you can have a look here and make your decision. And then you can return back to the logic model. So once this is all filled in, we can go next page. Next page is indicators. So indicators, you can read a little bit about them here, and then you also have a discussion about external factors and attribution effect. And this is what you need to pre-fill. So intermediate outcomes, you don't need to do anything. It came from the logic model once you have selected it. It is here just to remind you what choice you've made and what indicators are connected to what outcomes. Once this is selected, you will have a drop-down menu of indicators. So you can select which indicator you prefer to measure this outcome. You can also select custom indicator. So once you select custom indicator, the warning pops up. The warning just says that basically you're not going to be provide information about the indicator, but you can have a look at the indicators library and select your own indicator, or you can just put your own indicator, that is not even in indicators library. So we click OK, and up. Come on. I'll need to fix that. It should pop up the little, let me just check here.
It's Murphy's Law, Lucy. It always happens.
Maybe. Maybe it's because I logged the model. I'll have a look at it afterwards, and I'll get back to you, Jacqueline, and see if there's any fixing needed here. But basically, another column should pop up between indicators and values, and this is just a type-in column where you just type information. But if you're going along with the information from the indicators library, what you're going to get is that this will be pre-filled for you, the units. So we selected here number of businesses as a proportion of total businesses to measure the increase in their number of businesses. So this is going to be measured in the proportion and in percentage, and here is help on how to measure. So this will get pre-filled automatically from the indicators library once you select the indicator. Most of them have some useful information around where to get information and what are the type of days. Some of them don't have it, and for example, it can be internal records. So it is number and value of redevelopment projects. It is hard to get this information unless you're specifically tracking it. So if you want to see the increase in development investment, you want to track the number happening on the ground and the value of them. This can be done by a survey, for example, and that this comes up as an internal record. But if it is a secondary source and there is a good indicator for how to, good data source for how to do it, we would suggest it here, and that will help you to identify. So once you know how to do it, if you want to, you can put it here. So the pre-project value and the current value, and it will calculate the difference. You can do it elsewhere, and you can just put the number here. So once you're done, this part is done, and the final thing you need to do is external factors. So external factors here, you just need to think about, were there anything that was happening outside of your control that had an impact on the outcome? And it can be either positive or negative, and you can just list it here. So once you've done that, you're done, and you can click on results. So results is automatically pre-filled, and what you get is that this logic model that we had empty in the beginning, it has all the information you have put in. If you hover over the some of the, come on, do it. So it has some information about what it is. So we think that by the point you get to the results model, you know what each of these items means. So inputs, activities, outputs. But if you want a reminder, you can just have a look and it will give you a little definition. So here everything is pre-filled for you and has all the information. So if you just want a number, you can take the number out and put it into your report or presentation. If you want to use a diagram, you can. This diagram gets pre-filled automatically as well with the information you have provided previously, and it does it for each line. So you can just take that, highlight it, and then copy and paste it into your report. There's a little bit of instructions here. It's a little bit different between Windows and Mac. With Mac having one more step there of paste special, but overall you should paste it. If you paste it as a picture, it should look the same way as it looks in the Excel model. And what it does is that it is structured in the same way as the logic model. So you have each of these titles at the top, and then you have the associated information that you have put in. So the inputs you have put in, the activities you have undertaken, outputs you have created, and then the strategic outcomes that they're connected to, so the bigger reason why, and the immediate outcome that you have measured, and the value of it. And then another side, what also was impacting your outcomes is external factors that you need to think about. I think that is, yeah, there's last page as well, the indicators library. So here's just all the information about indicators. It talks about the strategic outcome, intermediate outcome that's connected to indicator sources for majority of them, the ones we could find or the ones we found useful, links to these data sources, units it is measured in, data type, and data release schedule. So this is an extensive indicators library, and we are hoping that we can keep growing this library. Now we have the logic model and have connection between outcomes and indicators. We can keep adding on and refining this indicators library. I will close this and I'll get back to the presentation. I'll do this. And
get another cuteness.
So I will talk about a little bit more about the model next time when we have a training session, and what would be amazing if you have some examples, so I don't keep reusing the examples, the easy examples I have come up with. Get us something challenging so we can try it out. So finally, once you went through the steps of the model, and depending on how you want to do it, do you want to make it more in depth and do a lot of research, look into the whole indicators library, select the best one you like and so on, or do you just want to go follow along the drop down menu and to select what we think suits the case best? You can scale it based on your time and the project you are undertaking. So the results is this end result toolkit is a clear diagram, and it shows all the steps you have undertaken, and you can use that to communicate to your stakeholders or to show it as a result of your work. This one I've just copied and pasted from Excel, so it should work. And finally, next steps. So next steps is going to be a toolkit training workshop. So we will go in a little bit more detail in the model itself. So now we know all the concepts behind it. If you want to trial the tool back and report back with any questions, that would be great. we will also really welcome any examples and questions for the next session. So if you have an example of the project or programs you would like us to test, send it through. We'll have a look and it will definitely make it more interesting. And finally, the last thing I wanted to say is that this is designed as a living tool. So once we have researched and put together the logic model, connected the steps, the next things is up to you. So you can share the knowledge about how you use the model. You can share the findings, what works best, what can be improved, and you can also grow the indicators library. So if the tool is going to be as good as you guys are going to make it. So if you have some indicators that you think should be in there, or while you're doing your work, there's new information comes up, share it in your economic development community, and let's update it in the model. So thank you so much. It was an exciting almost 2 years working on this project. And I do hope that you find this toolkit useful and it will really help your economic development activities, and especially showing the value of your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. We're getting lots of questions through, but just before we go to those, I just wanted to once again thank you for your incredible good work in developing this resource for the economic development sector on behalf of EDA. I mean, it is hours and hours of your time, and I think it will just, you know, really serve as such a fantastic legacy. So thank you for your expertise and your dedication to this project. It would not have happened without you. So, you know, amazing individual we have here. We're very lucky that Lucy's and Praxis have allowed for Lucy to dedicate so much time to this. We've got loads of questions coming through, which is fantastic. Please use the chat there. We've got about 22 minutes left, so we'll try and get to them all. If we don't, we'll pass them on to Lucy, and I'm sure she'll be able to get back to you. When you get your email in the next day or so with the link to the toolkit and the user guide, we'll provide you with an email to come back to providing questions and feedback. So we'll compile all of those in preparation for the next workshop in 3 weeks. So all of that will be provided to you in the email. So don't worry about that just yet. So let's start off. We have a question around if an activity aligns to more than one strategic outcome, example, encourage growth of existing businesses and increase international competitiveness and maybe increase employment opportunities, do you have to pick just one?
It would be best to pick just one, as at the end of the day, you need to see what indicator you want to measure. So the whole logic model process leads you to one indicator. If you want to have more than one indicator, you can do it. But if you want to have one specific indicator that you want to track, you'll need to select the strategic outcome. If you're not sure which one suits this activity best, have a look at the strategic outcomes library and see which intermediate outcomes and indicators it is connected to. If there is multiple indicators, so for example, it is leading towards increasing the investment, so you can track dollars, but it also creates more local businesses, then you can select two, and you have to do it twice then you need to put through your project twice, but then you can separate the activities as well. So I would say that this example is not a project, that would be a program that is aligned to a few strategic outcomes, and then you can break it up based on the specific activities or projects you are undertaking. Sorry.
Hopefully that answers that question. Thank you. Another quick one, I think here, can we assume the library for strategic outcomes and intermediate outcomes is locked, can't be edited or added to?
I think it is locked. So if you do want to, it is locked because it is linked to the cells. So we had to specify 12 strategic outcomes, so you can't add another one, because if you add it, then the whole functionality of the model doesn't work. You basically can just fill in, take this logic model and just fill it in somewhere else separately, because it wouldn't provide you any of the drop-down menus or hints on what you should do next. So because we wanted to be efficient and have drop-down menus, we had to specify strategic outcomes, and we had to link the intermediate outcomes to it. Because of that, we have locked it. But if by using this model, you keep seeing that there is maybe not the full amount of strategic outcomes, or not the full amount of intermediate outcomes being provided, we can update it at a later stage. So it is, model as it is locked just to preserve the functionality, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be improved at a later stage.
Yeah, and I think just reiterating what you said in your closing, Lucy, that this is, you know, it's a living resource. So we're very much seeking, you know, user feedback, certainly, particularly in these early days. So we'll really want that, that input from everybody as they start using it. Somebody is asking values. Can you please unpack how these are calculated? Is it auto or manual data input?
It is a manual data input. So the value itself, that the number, you will have to go into the resources that are provided and put it in. There is unfortunately no other way. If you guys can think of other way that it can pull that data out, that would be really cool. And it probably will make it like 100 times bigger than it is now. But currently all it does is that it provides you an information on the indicator. So once you have, I think the key thing about it is that it tells you what to measure. And it tells you where to get information to measure it. So then you can just go into the resource or look into your internal records and find that and put it in.
Thanks, Lucy. A specific question from Simon. Is there a strategic indicator for reducing emissions from businesses, so environmental outcomes?
No, there is no environmental outcomes. That was designed just for economic outcomes. It doesn't have a lot of social outcomes. It has a little bit, just a taster, and it doesn't have environmental ones. No.
And again, that might be something that we can work on in coming months and years when you've had a rest. How are we going here? Where do we send comments? Indico, I'll provide that in the email. Lots of very good feedback from everybody, keen to trial. I don't know that we've got any more questions there unless I'm missing. Very happy to keep us open for questions for a wee while longer, but maybe we've exhausted everybody. Everyone a couple of
hello. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. Who have we
Mark.
got? Mark. Hi, Mark.
Mark from Geraldton here. Look, great job, and it's I hadn't really appreciated that this had been 2 years in the making. Yeah, so great for hanging in there and coming in with such a great and very useful tool. So there are a number of questions coming in around about sort of how to, you know, and modifications, and I guess as people start to use this, there'll be all sorts of questions flying around about, you know, how to finesse the particular tool. So what's the process for helping people use this in the future? Are you setting yourself up as a sort of the help desk, or is Praxis doing that? Or is there another way of finding an efficient way of doing that without you having to sort of set up a remote call center?
We'll field the inquiries in the first instance, Mark, and feed those through to Lucy, as we've done with the working group. So EDA's ready and able to field those questions and feedback as the trial kicks off. So we'll include how to do that in the follow-up email that'll come in the next day or so.
Sounds very practical. Yeah, thank you.
Now we had another question. Peter Jeffrey is asking, any indication of expected dollar cost? I don't know what.
I believe the model is free for EDA members.
Yeah, Peter, are you asking if there'll be a cost to use it? Expected cost of what? We're just asking.
That's correct. To actually use the models,
Use it.
how much will it cost per council? And if it's an EDA membership add-on, which means you get it as part of your membership, fantastic. That answers my question. Thanks.
You get it as part of your membership. Yeah. So we've been very fortunate that Praxis undertook this work pro bono for EDA, and we are very pleased that that's allowed us to make this, this resource available to our members for free. So it'll be open source for members via the website.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and thank you very much, Jacqueline.
Any more questions? Last chance before the next time we gather in 3 weeks. I think we're good. Look, thanks everybody for logging on today. The session is being recorded, so when you do get the test model, you'll get the user guide, which is really comprehensive. Make sure you've got that open when you do try it for the first time and follow it. It is really logic model style, and but we will have this recording available as well. So if you do need to hear Lucy talk about it, that will be there for you as well. As I said, there'll be directions in terms of how to send any questions or feedback you have as you are trialling it. And also, as I said, we're really keen to get some examples from you. So if you can, run some practical examples through the toolkit and then share those with us. So that would be awesome. So again, we'll sign off there. Really appreciate everybody taking the time. I'm just going to save this chat so that we can capture any questions that possibly we missed. And we look forward to seeing you all again in 3 weeks' time. Now, I think what we've done, and Melissa might log on to nod at me, is that we've automatically registered you all again in 3 weeks. Yes, I got it right. So there's no need to do anything. We'll just assume that you are coming back, but of course we'll allow those that might have missed today to also join us. This is just members only at the moment, and again, you know, that really is just to allow for this to be a great resource and an additional value add for your EDA membership. So thanks again. It was really exciting for us to finally be able to share this with you all. A lot of people have worked really hard. Nobody has worked harder than Lucy. But thanks for all of you from the National Working Group that who have inputted and supported Lucy in this work. So thanks again, everybody. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks.